Your father needs you, Anna. Family should always come first. My dad's words kept replaying in my head as I stared at the resignation letter on my desk. After dedicating 8 years to building my nursing career in Boston, I was about to walk away from it all because of a guilt-laced phone call from Minnesota. My name is Anna, and at 33, I believed I had finally carved out a fulfilling life. I was thriving in a respected hospital, surrounded by friends who had become my second family, and I lived in a charming apartment with a view of the harbor. Then everything shifted with a single phone call. "Deborah's not doing well," my dad had said, his voice carrying a weight that sounded practiced rather than genuine. "Your brothers are tied up with their own lives, and you're the only one who knows medicine. You get what this means, Anna. We really need you here." As he went through all the reasons I had to return, I felt my hands tremble. He explained how Deborah, my stepmother for the past 15 years, was struggling to keep the household running. How they needed someone with the right knowledge to manage her care. How, in his words, family should look after each other. What he conveniently left out was why Jack and Peter, my 2 brothers who lived less than a half-hour away, couldn't help. Or why, with the income from his thriving construction business, they couldn't hire a professional caregiver. Or why this suddenly became urgent, even though Deborah had lived with these chronic conditions for years. Still, guilt is a powerful tool, especially in the hands of a parent who knows exactly how to use it. He reminded me of all the support they'd given me through nursing school. "Now it's time to give back," he said. So I found myself packing up my life and attempting to explain to my confused friends why I was leaving it all behind. My best friend Sarah was especially skeptical. "They're totally manipulating you," she told me during our final coffee outing. "They've got 2 sons right there, and somehow you're the one giving up everything?" And deep inside, I knew she wasn't wrong. But every time I thought about staying, I could hear my dad's voice in my head again. The quiet disappointment, the veiled reminders of what I supposedly owed the family. My hospital supervisors were kind about it, though clearly let down. "We'll really miss you in the ICU," one of them said. "Not many nurses have your knack for handling tough cases." After folding the resignation letter and slipping it into an envelope, I took a moment to absorb it all. 8 years of hard work, building a reputation, becoming the go-to nurse when things got rough. All of it was being left behind in the name of family. The moment I arrived back in Minnesota, the reality of what I had done hit me hard. As I pulled into the driveway, my dad stood on the porch, watching. He didn't come to help with the boxes, and Deborah watched me from the living room window, already frowning at how I parked. "You'll need to move your car," my dad said as his greeting. "Deborah needs space to get hers out." There was no welcome, no appreciation. Just an immediate complaint. I had just given up my apartment, placed most of my furniture in storage, and driven more than 12 hours to be here. My cat Luna was still nervous from the trip, meowing in her carrier. Yet, all that seemed to matter was the car. "We cleared out some stuff in the basement apartment for you," he added, finally descending the porch stairs. "It needs a bit of cleaning, though." I had nearly forgotten about that basement. It hadn't been touched since the early 1990s. Damp and dim, it was a sharp contrast to my cheerful Boston apartment with its sunlight and ocean breeze. As I followed him down the creaky stairs, he continued with instructions. "Deborah needs help keeping track of her medications, and the house needs a solid cleaning. She just can't keep up anymore." Looking around the basement, I tried to process the change. The space was essentially one large room with a small, outdated bathroom. The carpet smelled like mothballs, and the tiny windows barely let any daylight in. "I thought I was here to help with medical care," I said as I placed Luna's carrier on the floor. "You didn't mention housekeeping." "Family takes care of one another," he said, the same guilt-drenched tone resurfacing. "You're not saying you're above chores, are you?" That same guilt that had felt overwhelming over the phone hit even harder now, standing in a gloomy basement with my once thriving career behind me. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah popped up. "Did you make it okay? Is the place as bad as you expected?" Before I could reply, my dad cleared his throat. "Deborah needs her morning meds with breakfast. Be upstairs by 7 sharp. And keep that cat from making a mess." As he climbed the stairs, I heard Deborah's voice through the floorboards. "Frank, Tell her to vacuum before bringing in more boxes. I can already hear dirt crunching under her feet. I looked down at Luna, who stared back at me with her usual unimpressed look. What did we just sign up for, girl? That first week became a preview of what the rest would look like. Every day began with making sure Deborah took her medications, but that was merely the start. Suddenly, everything else in the household became my responsibility: scrubbing floors, running errands, cooking meals, washing clothes, trimming hedges, all while being constantly corrected. Deborah would peer over my shoulder, pointing out mistakes. According to her, I couldn't even fold towels the right way or measure laundry detergent properly. No wonder you're single, she'd add with a sigh, if this is how you handle basic chores. Despite being brought in for my professional nursing skills they had claimed were urgently needed, I found myself doing everything but medical care. It seemed her declining health mostly meant she no longer wanted to handle household duties, yet she still had plenty of energy to drive herself to weekly bridge games or spend hours browsing stores at the mall. My father, meanwhile, was rarely around, keeping busy with long days at his construction company. But when I brought up my concerns, he would always defend Deborah. She just likes things done properly, he'd say. Maybe if you paid more attention to the little things in your own life, you wouldn't be alone. The comments about my relationship status never stopped. It didn't seem to matter that I had a stable and successful career as a nurse. Without a husband, none of that counted. Meanwhile, my brothers lived their lives as if nothing had changed. Jack popped in once, saw me scrubbing the windows, and quickly made up a reason to leave. Some of us actually have real responsibilities, Deborah remarked after he'd gone. Desperate for support, I reached out to Peter, but he just chuckled. Better you than me, sis. You know what she's like. Yes, I did know. Like how she rearranged everything in my basement apartment while I was out picking up her prescriptions, claiming my clutter gave her anxiety. Or when she threw out my favorite mug because it didn't go with the rest of her kitchen decor. My friend Sarah kept pushing me to leave. You're an ICU nurse, she texted. Your old boss called. They still haven't filled your position. But every time I considered walking away, guilt stopped me. I'd been raised to believe that family always came first, even when family treated you more like hired help than a relative. The moment everything shifted came exactly 1 month after I had moved in. I was bent over, pulling weeds in her meticulously maintained rose garden, when I overheard Deborah on the phone with her sister. Frank was so smart, she said. All he had to do was play up my symptoms a bit, and Anna came running back. Now we have a live-in cleaner who won't complain because she's family. Though honestly, she's not very good at any of it. Her words hit me like a punch. My hands trembled as I yanked weeds from the flower beds. Free housekeeper. Exaggerated health issues. They had tricked me into giving up my entire life, not because they needed genuine help, but because they wanted unpaid labor. That evening, while making dinner, grilled chicken, which had to be prepared just the way Deborah liked it, I began keeping detailed notes on my phone. Every task, every rude comment, every moment of dismissal. I tracked how many hours I spent cleaning versus how much medical care Deborah actually required. I even checked her social media. Pictures of tennis matches, shopping days, and bridge nights. Hardly the behavior of someone facing serious health problems. At dinner, Deborah pushed her plate away and complained, "This chicken is dry." Honestly, Anna, for someone with a nursing degree, you'd think basic cooking wouldn't be so difficult. I glanced at my dad, hoping he might say something in my defense. He didn't even look up, just passed her the salt. And the roses, she went on, aren't trimmed properly. I saw you out there hacking away like you didn't have a clue what you were doing. I spent 3 hours in that garden, I replied softly. Well, clearly not making any progress. Also, the windows need cleaning again. I can see streaks from my seat. I placed my fork on the table. Interesting how your health never seems to prevent you from criticizing my cleaning, but always seems to stop you from doing any yourself. The silence that followed was heavy. My father paused with his fork midair. Deborah's tone dropped. What did you just say? I heard you earlier, I said. Talking to your sister. Bragging about how clever it was to exaggerate your health problems to get me back here. I'm not sure what you think you overheard. I heard plenty. About how you manipulated me into giving up my job. How you laughed at how easily guilt pulled me in. My dad finally looked up. Hold on a second. No, you hold on, I cut in. I work in intensive care. Did you really believe I wouldn't notice that Deborah's health magically gets better when it's time for tennis or shopping? I have good days and bad days, she snapped. No. You have days when there are chores and days when there's fun to be had. And somehow, I always end up with the chores. My father's expression darkened. You're being disrespectful. And you've been manipulative, I answered firmly. You used lies and my medical background to trap me here, just to do your housework without pay. After everything we've done for you, he began, his tone heavy with indignation. I met his stare, my voice steady. And what exactly is it you've done? Aside from convincing me to walk away from a thriving career and move into a damp, crumbling basement, my father's face flushed. That basement apartment was a generous offer. Most young adults would be thankful for free housing. Free? I let out a bitter laugh. I work from sunrise to well past sunset. I scrub your house top to bottom, prepare all your meals, and maintain the yard. Hiring a full-time housekeeper to do what I do would set you back thousands every single month. Family supports one another, he started to say, but I cut him off. Is that so? Because Jack and Peter are family too. Yet they have careers, homes, independence. Why aren't they the ones here helping out? They have families of their own, he muttered. And I had a life too, a successful career, a home with a view of the harbor. I gave all that up because you told me Deborah's health was failing. Deborah stood abruptly, her chair scraping the tile. I do need care. Just because I have a few good days doesn't mean good days. I pulled out my phone and scrolled. Let's go over this week. Monday? Tennis club. Tuesday? A 4-hour mall spree. Wednesday? You hosted bridge club. Thursday? Lunch with friends. Friday? Planning a spring cruise. Doesn't sound like a medical emergency. My dad shifted uncomfortably. Anna. Don't, Anna, me. My voice wavered but remained firm. I poured 8 years into building a career that made a difference, into becoming someone people turned to when their lives were falling apart. You twisted that compassion into a weapon against me. We needed someone, he said weakly. No, you wanted someone. There's a difference. You had choices, hire help, ask your sons, make other plans. Instead, you guilt your daughter into abandoning her life to be your unpaid maid. That's not fair, Deborah interrupted. We offered you a place to stay. A moldy basement with a leaky bathroom is hardly a generous gift. Meanwhile, I take care of everything around here and constantly hear how nothing I do is good enough. My hands trembled as I stood, pushing away from the table. The full weight of their manipulation was finally sinking in. You know what hurts the most? I said, my voice catching. If you had actually needed medical help, I would have found a way to be there without destroying everything I'd built. I would have coordinated care, arranged support. Because that's what real family does. Where are you going? My dad demanded as I walked toward the basement stairs. I'm done being your unpaid maid. I began throwing clothes into my suitcase. They followed me, both speaking over one another. Luna perched on the dresser, her tail flicking, silently watching the scene unfold. You can't just leave, my father insisted. You have responsibilities. Do I? What about your responsibilities? I snapped. Parents are supposed to want their children to thrive, not manipulate them into giving up their futures. We didn't force you to give up anything, Deborah cut in. You made the choice to come. I came under false pretenses because you lied about being seriously ill. Keep your voice down, my dad warned. This isn't how we raised you. No, you raised me to be compliant. To always put everyone else first. To feel guilty for having ambitions, for not giving it all up to be your live-in help. Luna stepped into her carrier on her own, as if she too was ready to leave. If you walk out that door, Deborah warned coldly, don't expect a warm welcome if you ever come back. I paused, then turned to face them both. That's your answer? More threats? More emotional blackmail? You say we're family, but real family doesn't use someone's loyalty against them. You used my profession, my empathy, to suit your own convenience. That isn't love. That's taking advantage. You're being overdramatic, Deborah snapped. Frank, say something. But my father was staring at me, something shifting in his eyes. For once, he wasn't seeing a daughter who could be pressured. He was seeing a woman who had found her voice. Maybe we can talk this through, he said slowly. Work out something better. There's nothing to work out, I replied. I'm going back to Boston. Back to the life I should have never left. Back to people who actually respect me. Deborah crossed her arms smugly. Your old job probably isn't even waiting for you. It is, I said calmly. My supervisor called last week. They've been holding my position, hoping I'd return. The look on her face shifted instantly. So this was your plan all along? No, I replied. I was hoping you'd prove me wrong. That this wasn't just about using me as free labor. I zipped up the suitcase and lifted Luna's carrier. The weight I'd been carrying for months began to lift as I headed upstairs. You'll regret this, Deborah called after me. No, I answered without turning back. What I regret is ever letting you manipulate me. What I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. But leaving? That's the first right decision I've made since I got here. The 12-hour journey back to Boston felt like breaking through the bars of a cage I hadn't even realized I was trapped in. With each passing mile, the burden of their manipulation, constant judgment, and passive cruelty seemed to lessen. Luna, nestled in her carrier, slept soundly, probably just as relieved to be escaping the damp, musty basement that had been our prison. My phone buzzed constantly, messages flooding in. My father alternated between playing the guilt card and angrily demanding I return immediately. Deborah, not one to hold back, had apparently called every family member she could reach, spinning a tale of how I had heartlessly abandoned them during a so-called crisis. My brothers sent uncomfortable, vague messages suggesting I think twice, though neither made any attempt to step in themselves. Still, not all the messages brought stress. Sarah had already arranged viewings for 3 apartments close to the hospital. My previous supervisor confirmed that my position was still available and sweetened the deal with a pay raise. Former coworkers sent enthusiastic notes about my return, sharing how much I was missed. Midway through the drive, I stopped at a hotel for the night, needing space to breathe and sort through the whirlwind of emotions. Sitting on the neatly made bed while Luna wandered curiously around the room, I finally allowed the tears to fall. Not from sadness or regret, but from the sheer release of tension and the simmering anger at how deeply I'd been taken advantage of. Around midnight, my phone rang again. My father's name lit up the screen. He started in with a quiet, almost weary voice. Your stepmother is very upset. Is she really? I asked, bitterness creeping in. Or is she just angry her unpaid housekeeper walked out? He tried to reason with me. Anna, please. We can figure something out. Like what? I asked. More manipulation about how I'm supposed to support the family? More fabricated stories about Deborah's failing health. We do need help, he said, sounding genuinely worn. Then hire someone, I shot back. That's what families do when they need care. You don't guilt-trip your daughter into throwing away her life because you won't pay for support. There was a pause on the other end. I didn't realize. I didn't think. No, you really didn't, I replied. You didn't consider what you were asking me to give up. You never thought about what it felt like being treated like some live-in servant. You saw a convenient way to get free help and took it. That's not fair, he muttered. Neither was deceiving me to get me there, I said firmly. Neither was sitting silently while Deborah tore down everything I did, while she went off to tennis games and planned luxury cruises. And it certainly wasn't fair making me live in a moldy basement while my brothers got to go on with their lives uninterrupted. Once the call ended, my Aunt Ellen reached out, my mother's sister, who had never been fooled by Deborah's charm offensive. I'm proud of you, she said without hesitation. It's long overdue that someone finally stood up to them. The rest of the family doesn't agree, I sighed. They're just used to letting Deborah get away with everything, she said. Let them be the ones to scrub floors, prune the hedges, and endure her endless critiques. See how long they last. She had a point. Already my brothers were getting looped into requests for help, and surprise, they were suddenly too busy. It was amusing in a dark kind of way. Back in Boston, things came together faster than I'd dared to hope. The hospital welcomed me like I'd never left. I found a cheerful apartment in my old neighborhood, this time with a second bedroom perfect for a home office. Sarah was by my side, helping me shop for new furniture to replace what I'd left behind at my dad's place. 2 weeks after I left, Deborah posted a thinly veiled complaint on social media, looking for reliable housekeeping help. Her post dripped with passive aggression. Apparently, some people had forgotten what family obligations meant, and kids these days had no loyalty. The reaction in the comments section was eye-opening. My cousin Rachel, who once cleaned for them during a college summer break, shared her horror stories about Deborah's unrealistic standards and constant nitpicking. Others jumped in with similar experiences. The post went viral in the worst way for Deborah, exposing patterns I hadn't even been aware of. Now, my brothers felt the squeeze. Jack's wife called me sounding overwhelmed. "They want us to go over there every weekend," she said. "Jack keeps dodging, but your dad is starting to push. How did you even survive that long?" "I didn't," I said plainly. "That's why I left." Peter tried to step up, briefly. He lasted just one day before calling me, clearly rattled. Deborah made me redo the pantry 4 times because the labels weren't facing the same way. Then she criticized my sheet folding skills. Dad just sat there like a statue. I had no clue what you were putting up with. Aunt Ellen kept me posted as the situation at their house continued unraveling. 3 different housekeepers had already quit within their first week. Deborah's reputation was starting to crumble among her social circle, especially at her bridge club, where the truth about her behavior was spreading. My father, too, was finally feeling the sting of accountability for his years of turning a blind eye. "They're finally seeing that real help isn't cheap," Ellen reported. "And now, even offering pay doesn't guarantee someone will stay. Believe it or not, your dad's actually had to do his own laundry. First time in 20 years. About a month after my return, my supervisor called me into her office. I braced myself for a reprimand, worried I might still face fallout for leaving the way I did. Instead, she surprised me with a promotion. "We missed having you," she said. "Not just for your skills, but for your commitment to what's right. We need more nurses like you stepping into leadership." That evening, I settled into my new apartment, watching the sun slowly dip below the harbor horizon. Luna was stretched out lazily on the windowsill, the two of us finally wrapped in a sense of calm and contentment. My phone vibrated with yet another message from my dad. "The house feels empty without you. Deborah really misses your help." I replied with a short message that carried the weight of my decision. "I'm sure she does, but I'm not for sale anymore." 6 months had gone by since I walked away from that life when an unexpected call came from Marie, Jack's wife. Her voice was urgent. "You need to hear this," she began. "I was dropping off some documents at your dad's place and overheard Deborah venting to her sister. She was complaining that she couldn't get any housekeepers to stick around. Then she actually said, Anna was so much better. At least she couldn't quit when I criticized her because she was family." That kind of remark didn't shock me anymore. "What about my dad?" I asked. "That's the surprising part," Marie said. "He finally stood up to her. He told her that she was the reason no one would stay, and that maybe, if she had treated you with a little more respect, none of this would have happened." It turned out that their household wasn't as self-sufficient as they'd once believed. Word through the family grapevine revealed they eventually had to bring in a professional cleaning crew, one that charged top dollar due to the couple's less-than-stellar reputation. Deborah, still stuck in her high standards, had to start managing her own laundry because no one could meet her expectations. Meanwhile, my dad had begun learning the basics of cooking just to get by. Aunt Ellen sent me a picture of what used to be their meticulously groomed garden. Now it was wild and unkempt. Deborah's health had declined, making it hard for her to care for it, yet she wouldn't allow anyone else near her treasured rose bushes. Alongside the photo, Ellen had texted a single, clever line, "Karma is a master gardener." As for me, my life was blooming in ways I never imagined. I earned a promotion, started teaching nursing courses part-time, and began dating someone who genuinely valued my independence and professional goals. That Christmas, Aunt Ellen hosted the family celebration for the first time in years, breaking the long-standing tradition. Deborah wasn't in control of the event, couldn't dictate who brought what dish, or arrange the seating chart to reflect her own version of the family hierarchy. I arrived at the gathering with a store-bought pie, a choice that would have horrified Deborah. My brothers and their wives seemed lighter, relieved by the absence of conflict and scrutiny. My dad came by himself. Apparently, Deborah had declined to attend since she couldn't be the host. Later, during a quiet moment, he pulled me aside. He looked older, wearier than I remembered. "I've been thinking about everything," he said. "I watched you grow, succeed in your career, become someone your patients trust. And instead of being proud, I played a part in holding you back." "Why?" I asked gently. "Why did you let that happen?" He took a long breath. "It was easier to let your happiness go than to stand up to Deborah. I regret that now." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever expected from him. We weren't as close as we once were, and maybe we never would be again, but there was something honest in that exchange that gave me peace. Later on, while I was helping Ellen wash the dishes, a quiet smile crept across my face. Life felt lighter now that I no longer chased approval or struggled under someone else's expectations. Ellen glanced at me and said, "Do you know what the best kind of revenge is?" She handed me a plate to dry. "What's that?" "Living well. And from where I'm standing, you're doing just fine with that."